You either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. I'm Nico.
And I'm Chris.
And we are finally in our favorite season, the spooky / your spoopy season.
It has begun. Today I turned my banana into a ghost for snacking.
Yes, you did.
It was adorable.
I couldn't tell it was peanut butter underneath it.
It's okay.
Yeah. But yes, we are in the Halloween spirit. I will say I am elbows deep in it right now. Continuing my 31 days of Halloween, where every day I watch a new horror film, and I have yet to get into the really, what did I just watch yet? So I'm not too far into it.
Yeah, you haven't, not too far. This year I'm exploring the wonderful world of Cabernet and classical oddball music. So, it's a whole genre. I don't know how to describe it. It's a thing.
Yeah, I'm getting weird with Japanese body horror.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, that rabbit hole again.
Yep.
Yeah, so today, because we like to balance our choices for Halloween out.
Yeah. Because there are two sides to this holiday.
There are.
Yeah.
And we are on either side of them.
Fair.
We are going with Chris's pick this year of Monster House.
Yes.
A movie that I have not seen probably since it came out.
I think a lot of people had a kind of a weird experience with this movie. Because it did okay when it came out. People went and saw it.
Yeah.
And so you were either in one of two categories. You either went and saw it when it came out, and then immediately forgot of its existence and didn't remember it ever again. Or you missed this movie when it came out, and now you rewatch it, you know, for Halloween every year, because what is this movie?
Well, I am on the camp of, I know I didn't see it in theaters, but I probably saw it when it came out on DVD, because I'm pretty sure I was in Italy at this point, and so we weren't going to go to the base to see an animated film, despite seeing, like, Shrek 2 shortly before that.
That doesn't count. It's live action at this point.
Yeah. So, before we get into the whole, what Monster House is, what are we drinking today, Chris?
Well, we are drinking pre-made lemonade that came out of a green-tinted plastic bottle.
Which will come up later in the movie.
Which will come up later in this movie.
Cheers.
Cheers. I can really taste that 3% concentrated juice.
Totally. So, Monster House was... I found out this a little bit after the fact. Monster House was originally written in 1998, and it was originally envisioned as a live action, but was changed to a CGI movie when the Polar Express came out and motion capture suits were available.
Yeah.
Mostly I was surprised. It was written by Dan Harmon. Yes, that Dan Harmon.
Yeah.
Rob Schrab and Pamela Petler.
Yeah, and this movie... So, a lot of people compare this movie look-wise to Polar Express. For some reason, Polar Express, when it came out with the motion capture technology, everyone was really amazed by it. I remember it being kind of that was the reason you went and saw it, was because it was like a new and cool...
Yeah.
Kind of like how Avatar was like, wow, the 3D is so cool. It was similar vibe, and then some people really fell in love with the style. And thus Polar Express is like a Christmas classic at this point.
Yeah, well,
this movie, I think the character models in this one are a little bit too fugly. I think they put a lot of people off, unfortunately.
And I'll get into that in a little bit, because yes, there are issues with the animation. I didn't realize that Polar Express was a motion capture movie until doing research for this one, and Monster House was the second one to do it.
Yeah. So granted, like, there's always leeway for things being the first couple ones to do a thing. And I also think that as someone who really likes, like, Art Nouveau and French, like, old school French art, where everything is very exaggerated and it's almost like a cartoon.
It's very you like German expressionism, that kind of style,
where everything's purposefully a little bit ugly. I like Monster House and how it looks, but not a lot of people do.
I will say, when I first booted it up, I didn't realize how jarring it was.
It's a big jump.
But that was done purposefully.
Yeah.
I learned that they originally, how they got the models is they made clay models and then they 3D scanned them.
It does, especially the three main characters, very much still maintain their claymation roots. You can see it, especially their hair and their the non-moving parts of their faces, like ears, the upper forehead, eyebrows, that sort of part. You can still see that quite a lot, and I like that. I like it a lot. But where Polar Express attempted to build a CGI world that kind of fit the characters to an extent, so they weren't quite as harsh. Everything was meant to be softer and fun and full of whimsical joy. Yeah. Monster House, it's trying to be scary.
Yeah, no, so, it really is. And to backtrack a little bit, Gil Kennan, the director, that's his inspiration for it, is he wanted it to feel handmade, and he was inspired by stop animation. So that's why it's a little rigid and a little jarring.
Yeah, and honestly, I do think that this movie's style, once you know what you're getting into, or once you've seen it, watch it once, give it a day, watch it again, and it does grow on you pretty quickly. Yeah, it's one it's not so jarring. It's not like 80s anime where it's really jarring to watch. This one, it's jarring at first, but it's like stepping into a cold pool. Yeah. Where once you're up to your waist in it, you get used to it. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But I also learned that this movie was originally going to be made by DreamWorks in 2004.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad it wasn't, though.
They would have ruined it, let's be honest.
DreamWorks and horror have never been super compatible. Yeah. Like, they've got some stuff that I would argue turned out fine, but Monster House, Sony feels like a better pick.
Yes, and I learned of a new term in the film industry. It's called a turnaround. Yes. So this is how Sony was able to acquire it. A turnaround is an arrangement in the film industry whereby the production costs of a project which one studio has developed are declared a loss on the company's tax return, thereby preventing the audio from exploiting thereby preventing the studio from exploiting the property any further. And so what they can do is they can sell it to another studio in exchange for cost of development plus interest. Thank you, Wikipedia.
Good definition.
Yeah. But yeah, and also just to talk a little bit about the animation style too. And it kind of fits with the scale of things and why the movie for me felt a little dead was that the motion capture, the space that they had to work in was 20 by 20.
Ooh, that's tight.
That is very tight. And so that
explains why a lot of the characters don't seem to have movement.
They don't have a lot of space to move around in.
Yeah, that makes more sense now.
Yeah, and also it was filmed in 30 days.
Which also explains a lot.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
But
the other thing to also keep in mind is this was a July release, which we've talked a little bit about this before, about Halloween stuff coming out in July.
Yeah.
And for kids stuff specifically, for some reason, this is fairly common. Is the kid Halloween stuff comes out in July, and then if you're lucky, adult stuff comes out in October.
Yeah.
If you're lucky. I kind of get it. More kids are going to go to the movie theater in July and all that sort of stuff. Like, it budget-wise makes sense. But most kid movies that are aimed at Halloween, I would argue, are spooky on the front, completely, children approved and safe on the inside. Monster House is...
It toes that line.
It toes that line real hard.
It's very much like how like the Goonies, because Spielberg also produced this. I learned that too, or was one of the producers.
It has a Goonie vibe.
Yeah, where Goonies starts off with a dude faking his suicide in a prison cell and escaping, And then quickly goes into kind of a child's movie, but also being...
Yes.
It feels very much like it's a throwback to, like, these kind of movies when we were kids.
Yeah.
Because they always had a darker feel to it.
This movie definitely also has some Goosebump vibes to it, where, the plot is childish, and for the most part, it's a kid's movie, but there's enough of that reality line that they're stepping on that as an adult watching it, you've got questions.
Oh,
and they are not kid-friendly questions.
They are not, and oh boy, this is not a podcast for children, even though we are doing a children's movie. I am going down many rabbit holes that I've already brought up to you guys.
Yes. And normally when you go down one of your Zabrowski holes, sometimes it's just for funs and shits and giggles, but this movie does leave enough open that a normal movie conspiracist, I will say, because we both spend a lot of time thinking about what ifs, and theorizing in movies. Even a casual adult watcher, there's some red flags that pop up in this movie.
Oh, Chowder,
are you okay, bud? But also the house in general has some questions. The backstory to Constance, the wife, there's a lot of questions with her that I have, and the movie doesn't answer any of the adult questions whatsoever because it knows that this movie isn't about you.
No, I'm aware it's not a movie that's for me at my age now.
But honestly, I think that's part of the brilliance of this writing is because it's got enough questions that adults have. They're not even questions like, oh, what about this plot hole? It's legitimate questions that you would like to know the answer to, and the movie knows that, and it says, no thank you, and then you're left hanging and thinking about it.
And they take a different route instead of like how Disney would do like a little innuendo. This is just straight up this is a kid saying something that he doesn't know what it actually means. It's just a fact of his life to him.
Yeah, like once he's an adult and is, established with his therapist, he will realize that this was not a normal or healthy childhood.
Yes.
But this is his life right now, and he doesn't know.
Yeah. So
that's this movie.
Yeah. So Monster House.
Yeah.
We had some discussion while we were watching it of where the setting is.
We think we've pinpointed.
No, I know exactly where it is.
Oh, you figured it out?
Yeah. I forget that IMDb has a trivia page.
Oh, yeah, they do.
And you are wrong. Not all Halloween movies have to take place on the East Coast.
No, but boy, howdy do they love it.
It is set in Mayville, Wisconsin.
Oh, it's a Wisconsinner.
Yes. I think they mentioned, or whoever posted it mentioned that there was, like one line of dialogue and a quick flash of the license plate.
Oh, the license plate.
Yeah, it's something really little.
That's good.
Because we were focusing on the architecture because we were trying to figure out.
That is such an architect bullshit thing to do too, and we should know better as American architects that
But it fits the East Coast because they have Dutch colonial houses.
It does. Wisconsin would very, very much fit in on an East Coast, visually from an architecture standpoint.
Yes. I did try looking up the buildings in Mayville on Google Earth.
Uh-huh. How'd that go?
It is a tiny town of like 5,000 people, and Google has not gone to their neighborhoods.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But from what I can see from the main streets, it looks like a regular ass suburb.
I mean, that also sounds about right.
Yeah. And we were pretty close on the time era, too.
See, this was a fun game, especially because I like fashion so much. The fashion in this one is just old enough for you to kind of get a hint that this isn't now. But also it's not so out there that, like, you're like, wow, that 70s show.
Yeah. My key was the video games, obviously.
The video games were a pretty big hint.
And there's some contention on where it's at, or I've seen multiple things of saying what era it is. It's definitely in the 80s.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There were some things I read that mentioned that the fashion was late 80s, but the video games and cars and stuff were more early 80s.
Yeah, most of the fashion we see is either by the babysitter, who is clearly going for punk, and she's clearly also trying to do, like...
she's very grunge.
She's very grunge, and she's trying to pull off a little bit of that British punk that was kind of brought over and was its own subcategory in a way, because it definitely had its own thing. The boots were specific. Okay. The leather coat was very iconic. And so I can see where that line could be weird, but also 80s and punk, that line was a lot of places. Depending on where you were. Like, that line was pretty straight if you were, like, in San Francisco.
Yeah.
But if you're living in the middle states, that could be... I mean, we thrift stored everything, let's be real here.
See, I have no clue about that era, because I'm just...
I wished I was a punk when I was a child, but alas, my mother said no, and I bought my clothes from the Goodwill, where there were no punks donating.
Punks changed to emos for me in high school.
I think a lot of us had that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the other part about this is all the kids are the other thing we see mostly is either kids or old people. Mm-hmm. Old people notoriously don't on top of fashion, and kids, especially this age range that we're looking at, you get to wear what your parents give you. So if your parents give you an ugly-ass turtleneck, you get to wear the ugly turtleneck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
and one
childhood.
of them's wearing a school uniform for the whole thing, so...
yeah,
ugly school uniform.
Private school.
Oh, elite private school, for sure.
Yeah.
She is going to an all-women's college to be a politician in her future. I can feel it.
Oh, yeah. So... actually into the movie.
Yes, the actual movie.
The opening of it is kind of interesting. I learned that it's pretty much an homage to The Shining with the tricycle scene.
Oh, yeah.
And it's where we're introduced to the rough animation of some little pigtailed child.
And this is the part of the movie that I think a lot of people can't get over. Which is fair. The little girl is the roughest character in the whole movie.
Yeah.
Kids are hard, and cute kids with pigtails with missing teeth are arguably even harder because proportions are weird, they look weird, they sound weird, they act weird. So how do you portray that convincingly with CGI that's a new technology? She doesn't work.
Yeah.
But her concept works fine, and we get introduced to our supposed villain. Nebercracker, who I love Nebercracker as a last name. It's a good, solid, kid, scary last name. Mm-hmm. Got a lot of consonants in there. It's long enough to be obnoxious. Perfect.
Makes me think of, what's that Christmas animation you had us watch last year with...
Which one?
The Nicholas one with the Nazi toy dude.
Oh, Rudolph is coming to town.
Was it?
I think
it's the St. Nicholas one.
Oh, Santa Claus.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll watch it again, don't worry.
Yeah, his name makes me think of whatever that dude's name was.
Yeah, Mr.
Niebermeiser.
Yeah, Mr. Niebermeiser.
Yeah.
Mwah.
So how we're introduced to Nebercracker is the girl's bike gets trapped on the lawn.
Yes. She's a weak peddler and cannot get out of a nicely manicured lawn. And he comes out, old man style, stomping, screaming. She is full on terror screaming.
Get off my lawn!
And this part always, like, as an adult, you're like, whoa, hold on. He takes her trike, breaks the front wheel off.
Yeah.
How strong is this old man?
Crazy old man strength.
But as a kid, you don't notice that, and you're like, yeah, it's okay, fine. He broke her toy. And then marches back inside with the toy, completely just stole and broke a small child's toy.
Oh, yeah. As for the voice actors for this, I want to mention this beforehand.
Yeah.
All of them were Kennan's first pick, which
is kind of
never
impressive.
happens.
Yeah.
Never happens, and it was his directorial debut.
Yeah, this was big for him.
And the only cast I wasn't really sure who they were, and I still don't know who they are. All three of the kids who played the trio.
They're Disney stars, but you weren't a Disney kid.
No,
so.
exactly.
And honestly, even if you were a Disney kid, specifically Disney Channel stars.
Yeah, exactly. I had no clue.
They were very famous to a small group of audience.
Yeah, and Nebercracker is played by Steve Buscemi.
Yes, a wonderful pick.
Which is interesting too, because like all these actors they picked, none of them had done any type of motion capture, and they mentioned that it was a little difficult at the beginning. Yeah, but they got used to it real quick.
Yeah, that's really good. Honestly, and I think I'm going to call him Steve because his last name does not flow off my tongue very well. But his performance, I would argue, motion capture-wise, is the most convincing. The facial expressions are really good. You do get a good range there. Yeah. And also, he doesn't feel unnaturally stiff. He feels old man stiff.
Yeah.
And there's enough raging and arm movement with him that he feels the most clean.
Yeah, because we talked about this a little bit when we were watching it together. When you mentioned that you recently rewatched Toy Story and how rough that one actually is.
The first Toy Story, especially if you haven't watched the cleaned up remastered version. I know they don't call it remastered, but let's be real here. They cleaned that sucker up.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's rough.
Oh, yeah.
The people's faces. Andy's face is nightmare fuel. This one looks much better in comparison, and time-wise, I mean, we're not looking at a big gap here.
No, not really. And so, after this, Nebercracker starts going into the house, and we are introduced to his across-the-street, creepy
nemesis.
child, DJ.
DJ is a very creepy child.
But at the same time, we all did stupid shit like these kids do.
We all did stupid shit, and we were also introduced pretty quickly to DJ's parents, who, the dad reminds me of a very stereotypical 70s to 80s suburban dad.
Yeah.
He's got other things to do. The kid can watch himself. He's growing up. He's gonna be a man. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And his mom is just the weirdest worrywart. And like everything she does, you're like, well, this is why DJ's weird. You are the cause of DJ being a weird child.
Yeah. Both played by Fred Willard and Catherine O'Hara, even though they're barely in the movie, they did a good job.
Yeah, definitely.
But before that, how the hell did Nebercracker see the Flash in the middle of the day?
You know, maybe he's real talented.
I don't know.
The other thing that I like to think is we've kind of established at this point in the movie, mostly with his dad and his mom complaining about how much he stares at their creepy old neighbor, that this isn't a habit that has started recently.
No.
This is a hobby that he's had for a long time now, and there's also a strong possibility that at some point they went across the street begrudgingly and was like, hey, our son's being a fucking weirdo, we apologize. And so, yeah, maybe he doesn't actually see the Flash. Maybe he's just accustomed to his weird-ass neighbor kid looking in his windows.
Yeah, making that awkward eye contact every now and then.
A lot of awkward eye contact available for this.
Yeah. And so, we are introduced to DJ's parents, who are going off to a dental conference
With
and
a big-ass toothbrush.
Accidentally almost run over Chowder.
Killed Chowder. The first thing that happens to this poor boy is he's coming over to play with his best friend, immediately gets run over.
Yeah. Super excited for Halloween.
Very excited for Halloween. Chowder is a character who I think is actually really well written because he is an annoying little brat.
Yeah.
But he is so cleverly written, and his lines have enough weight that as an adult, you feel bad for Chowder.
Oh, yeah.
You feel real bad for Chowder, and also the things that are annoying to you make sense about him.
Yeah.
So you have a lot more room for forgiveness for him as a character, which normally with annoying characters, you kind of just would like them to be run over by by your best friend's parents.
Yeah, the Chowder...
But the more Chowder speaks, the more you're like, oh, Chowder, honey.
Yeah.
It gets better when you move out, I promise.
Oh, yeah. So, Chowder's proud of the $20 basketball he bought.
Bought himself an expensive-ass basketball.
Actually, I'm curious now if basketballs even were that expensive in the 80s.
I have no idea about the 80s. I know they're kind of pricey now, but also, like, every garage sale on the planet has a basketball. So, like, Chowder bought himself a brand new basketball.
Yeah, and so they're getting ready for Halloween.
He's trying to get his friend pumped up. It starts off very classic kid Halloween. Like, we're too old for this, but also it's candy and it's fun.
Back when you could still eat a bunch of sweets.
And not feel deathly ill after 2.
Yes.
Yeah, so it starts off very classic. No real red flags happening yet. Yeah, it's a little ugly still, but, like, I'm adjusting. Chowder looks okay. DJ doesn't look bad from most angles.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not bad. It's getting there.
It's getting there.
And then, babysitter shows up.
I like the babysitter.
Z, played by Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Yes.
She enters the house, is acting all nice, proper babysitter.
She's got her overcoat on that looks all nice. She's got her hair pulled back into a little bun or headband or something. She's talking real loud about how she has games and activities, and the second he's like, they're gone, she's like, okay, great, leave.
Yep, lays down the ground rules again.
She's gonna listen to some of her music. She's gonna, hang out. She's gonna talk on the phone.
Okay, so we're coming to that age where we're gonna have potential nephews and nieces. Mm-hmm. And if we show them these kind of movies, we're going to have to explain a lot of stuff. Because we were sitting there watching it, and she's like, oh, I'll have control of the phone, I have music, I have television. And I thought for a second, and I forgot.
Kids nowadays all have their own phone.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean...
And you could only have one line at a time back then.
If there's a computer in this house, nobody gets to use the internet as long as she's on the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to be honest with you, kind of like the idea of a floppy disk being the save button. Mm-hmm. I think this, for this specific movie, because she only mentions it briefly, I think most kids will get a general, idea of, this is her trying to control the house.
Yeah.
The fact that she's claimed the music and the TV will probably be enough to get the point across that, this kid's now going to have to sit in his room by himself quietly and not do shit.
Yep.
But I do agree that there are definitely a lot of other movies in this same genre where the babysitter calls the telephone, and it will change the point of view a good deal.
Yeah, and we did miss a big part.
Which one?
The heart attack.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because before she shows up...
She shows up after the heart attack.
Yeah, so, I got them flip-flopped.
Honestly, the order isn't super important, story-wise, but yeah, DJ goes across the street because his friend Chowder misses the basket, hits himself in the face, and the ball goes across the street magically.
Yep.
It went very far for how hard it hit him in the face.
Hard head.
And so they're trying to psych each other up to go get the basketball.
Yeah, as you do as kids.
Especially with a creepy old house.
When we were in Alaska, there was one house down the road that she'd dress up as a witch every year.
Yeah.
And my parents had to
go
get some candy.
We had a house in the neighborhood who was very into Halloween, and the husband would always hide as a skeleton or a dead body or a scarecrow in the yard and get you as you were going up to her to get the candy. And boy, that house was very difficult to get through every year, but they handed out full-size bars.
My goal is to be able to do that, but with actually terrifying props.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Not fun for children. But yeah.
But anyway, in true style, old man comes running out, screaming and hollering, picks DJ up, shaking him by his armpits, and has a heart attack. And supposedly dies.
Yep.
And ambulance comes, picks him up, and DJ briefly mentions, no siren. That's never a good sign. What child knows that?
Grandparent died?
It's hard to say with poor DJ.
Yeah, but then again, I mean, this movie is a little bit more mature than I think we give it credit for.
It definitely is. And
so begins also DJ's existential crisis of the film
because now the house is haunting him.
Yeah.
We also do get our first taste at the house itself being truly haunted and not just a creepy old man across the street. Because we do get to see the grass trying to hold on to the old man as he leaves.
Yep, DJ picks up a key.
Yep. We get the key at this point. Which,
And so, DJ goes back, and this is when we get the babysitter. Yep. Chowder runs off home.
Chowder.
And so he goes up to bed, and as he falls asleep, the house creeps in. Which comes to my first inappropriate comment of the episode.
Of course.
The house looks like a dick.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. At the same time, I do give it a little bit of leeway because I think what happened was they tried to use the actual house's silhouette.
Yeah.
Instead of exaggerating the roof like you would need to get a house shape. They spent a lot of time in this movie modeling the house to look human.
Yeah, and very iconic horror at the same time, which this was the hardest part of us trying to figure out what type of architecture this house is, because
was a mess.
I mean, it has some basic Americana with the front porch, very gothic roof. I almost said shingle at one point, but it's all planks.
Yeah, and on top of that, this house, as the movie goes, does change.
Yeah.
And so the house at the beginning needs to look old, but not terrifying.
Yeah.
And so because they're using that... What is your cat doing?
That is Hobbs yowling.
Adorable. But because they used the actual silhouette from the beginning of the movie for this scene, yeah,
it looks like a malformed dick.
It does, unfortunately.
But it's also the house...
Don't say
intruding.
it. There we go. Okay.
Intruding. You know exactly what I'm thinking.
Yes.
It's also a red scene.
It is.
But anywho, a hand comes up out of the shadow, which is early foreshadowing of, because the hand is obese.
It is. And to be honest with you, the backstory of Constance and the house, I like a lot. And we'll go over more as the house progresses throughout this plot. But I like this scene only because it does start adding the bits of curiosity at the beginning, which a lot of children's horror-esque movies don't bother to do. They would have left it with the old man presuming to be dead, the house is creepy, maybe the shadow moves, and that would be it. And we'd find out about Constance way down the line once you don't care anymore.
Yes.
I like that they're adding those little touches here now.
Yeah, it's definitely a more developed movie than
what we're used to.
Yeah. And so he's woken up by a phone call, and he kind of has a little bit of a freak out, and while he's watching the house, who walks up on him? Bones.
Bones is a creepy-ass character.
Bones, we find out, is Z's boyfriend, who, though he's supposed to look like a older rocker, he looks like Richard Ramirez.
Unfortunately, yes, a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking into it more, I couldn't find anything saying that they pulled any imagery from Richard.
No.
I think, unfortunately, Richard happened to be slightly fashionable at the time. Like, he had the hair, he had the clothes, he had something of a face. I'm not saying he was fashionable. I'm saying he fit into what the movie's trying to portray, the boyfriend and the babysitter, to kind of be into that punk, emo, rock scene.
Yeah.
And I mean, unfortunately, he does look a lot. And part of it's also because the animation's a little rough on this guy.
I mean, it could be in the time frame too. So.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so while I couldn't find anything saying that he is directly an influence, he definitely does. He does look like him quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I think the movie is, like you said, trying to portray that Z is going out with this guy, and he's clearly an immature, but way older than her. Burnout type of guy. And he's gross, he's weird, he gives DJ the heebie-jeebies for sure.
He tears apart his bunny.
Rude.
Which, as Kenan said, was supposed to be like the last of DJ's innocence, but
I don't see it.
I don't buy it.
I don't buy it, especially because anyone who has an very elderly toy in their house knows those bad boys rip all the time. They are in constant surgery. So, yeah, it's rude that he messed with it, but the bunny is fine. It will be put back together.
But it also gives us another reason to dislike this person.
And also to kind of not trust the babysitter, which I like, because the movie never actually straight out says that DJ shouldn't trust her. We just get a lot of implications on why DJ shouldn't go to her and explain all the creepy-ass shit that's going on across the street, and why the house is trying to kill him. Which makes more sense than just being like, he forgot that she was there. Yeah. This is a good explanation on why.
And we are immediately shown how much of a creep he actually is.
Yes.
Because they're sitting watching movies, and this is before Netflix and chill, so...
This is the just chill part.
Or he wants more than just chill.
For sure.
And she kicks him off, kicks him out, says...
You don't love me, you don't respect me.
Yes, basically.
And I do kind of like this scene because, A, it puts him back outside, which for a kid just means that he's not in the picture anymore. But as an adult watching the movie, you do kind of like, in the back of your mind, you're like, that creepy-ass man is out there somewhere. He's just hanging around this neighborhood now. Yeah. Which adds to a layer, but also it kind of redeems Z a little bit. It makes her more human.
She's a bit more responsible. She's just not gonna screw her boyfriend when there's a kid upstairs.
Yeah, which I appreciate, because they could have easily just had her all be just an irresponsible teenager. I like that they gave her some roundedness.
Yep. And so we get our first victim.
Mm-hmm.
He throws a bottle at the house.
Yep.
And the door opens, and there's a kite. Because before he mentions, when he's talking to Z, that there's a kite, an awesome kite he had as a kid.
Yeah.
And obviously reference to It, which apparently there's a lot more references to Stephen King's works in this movie that I'm not familiar with.
They are less obvious than the kite.
Yeah.
But they are definitely there.
And so he's lured into the house, and he's pulled in.
By the weird-ass carpet tongue.
Yes. I learned in the original story, he was not supposed to be in the original story, DJ was being bullied by two boys, and he lured them into the house first.
Oh, darker.
Also, in the original story, everyone dies. Everyone who is eaten by the house dies.
Which I'm okay with.
To keep the PG rating, though.
Yeah, no, it is understandable why they had to release them all, but yeah. You can see it very clearly where they're like, and everyone's fine, go home.
Yep.
But I do like that they changed it from DJ being shown being bullied to where Chowder just throws hints all the time about how him and DJ are very much not popular at school and probably bullied.
Exactly. And so who does DJ, who has seen all of this, who's he gonna call?
Not Ghostbusters, sadly.
No, Chowder.
Chowder, the very helpful Chowder.
His only friend.
Which is fair. Like, you're gonna call your best friend if you just watched your, like, weird-ass babysitter's boyfriend thing get eaten by the house across the street.
Who Chowder is obviously home alone.
Very much home alone. Yeah, poor Chowder.
Yeah. And so Chowder and we know Chowder's home alone because this is where we first get
this is the first taste.
Introduction. Oh, that's how Chowder gets called home first, is Z saying there's some angry man on the phone calling for someone named Chowder.
The one called Chowder.
So Chowder mentions that his dad's working and his mom is at the movies with her jazzercise instructor.
A yoga person, an exercise person.
Yes.
Not the dad.
Yeah. And I mean, it's still dark.
It's still dark, and also, he throws out like, "Hey, my dad's still at work, and he's a pharmacist." It's kind of looks like it's like 7:00 at night in a small town. Don't know any pharmacists in small towns who are still open.
No,
this late. So unless this guy's stocking shelves by himself in the middle of the night, I think
he's up to something else.
Chowder's dad is up to something else, and just telling Chowder much more delicate lies than his mom is.
Yeah. And so, or he's the one telling Chowder what his mom's doing, but they gotta keep up the appearances.
One of the two. Poor Chowder. Anyway, this means Chowder is completely free for shenanigans.
Yeah. And so Chowder shows up thinking, oh, DJ's so full of it, and proceeds to taunt the house.
Like a dumbass.
Tries army crawling up to it. Ooh, so spooky. Ding dong.
He was gonna ding dong in the ditch, but instead stands on the front porch like a dumbass pretending to be the old man.
Yep, and the house opens and starts reaching out for them with the tongue. And so Chowder's now freaking out, which also brings up a question I have about the house.
Yes.
Do haunted houses or haunted objects understand property lines or easements?
Okay, so we kind of had this discussion, and I've had more thought about it since our last discussion. So there's a bunch of different ghosts throughout the world and history.
Yeah.
Some clearly do understand property lines. There's definitely like property-bound ghosts, there's house-bound ghosts, there's thing-bound ghosts. And then there's ones that are just there for shits and giggles.
Yeah.
But I would argue that this movie is attempting to create a new monster.
Okay.
So it definitely starts off, and there's hints of it later on in the movie when we hear the old man's side of the story. That originally, yes, this was just a standard ghost haunting house scenario. But throughout the clues later on that the old man gives, it's implied that the ghost and the house line has become so blurred that it's not really a ghost possessing the house. The house itself is a monster. Similar to, like, one of those treasure chests that has teeth.
Jeff Goldblum in The Fly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, the house itself, I would argue at the beginning of the movie, could be considered still, like, a poltergeist house that's fucking with stuff.
Okay.
Once the old man leaves, I think that's when the house starts really having problems. And then later on, the old man mentions briefly, like, you know, the closer you get to the end of a natural human's life, the more monster you are. He doesn't say it that way, but I can't remember his exact word.
Yeah, it's kind of like the theory that it can start off as a residual haunting, but then over the decades, it's lost its ghost energy.
Exactly.
And becomes berserker.
Exactly. And so I kind of think that's where this movie was trying to go with it.
Okay.
I like that it gave us all the hints and clues possible, because other people have come up with different scenarios. There's a lot of people online who have theorized about this movie, and what the house is, and what Constance is, and Chowder. And so, yeah, some people went, you know, poltergeist. Some people have just said haunting. Mm-hmm. But I like the concept that this movie's trying to kind of create its own lore.
Okay.
Because, honestly, we don't see a whole lot of new lore. And to be fair, this movie did a good job of wrapping up all of its loose ends, no matter which way you look at it.
Yeah, to a point.
Yeah.
And so Chowder and DJ have fled.
Yes, as they should.
The children they should have.
Don't say the children they are. A normal adult would also run if a house ate a man. I would leave. I'm putting my house for sale and I will be moving somewhere else. Thank you, good sir.
Later in the movie we'll contradict that statement. And so they go back in the house, and the house, of course, makes
scary noises and then goes back to being the house.
And we're cut to Z waking up on the couch to the doorbell ringing, and we are introduced to Jenny. Yeah, so Jenny shows up. She's this proper...
She is a prim and proper private school girl who is trying to make money for either an organization that she's in.
I think it's her college fund or something.
College tuition.
Who cares?
She's trying to make money and she's not a Girl Scout. That's all I know. And I kind of like Jenny's character to an extent. I think she's, out of the three, the most flat. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot that they were definitely trying to portray with her about being the most adult-like, the most stereotypically responsible child. But
I'm going to make a comparison that you are going to absolutely hate.
Go for it.
She is the Hermione of the group.
She's the Hermione of the group.
DJ's Harry, Chowder's Ron.
Yeah. Yeah. There is definitely some parallels there. Unfortunately, because that trio setup does work, and we've seen it lots of times where there's the hero, there's the best friend idiot, who's not necessarily the idiot he appears to be.
Female romantic interest slash
the brains of the group.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've seen this trio work before, and DJ and Chowder work really well. Jenny, I think, could have worked more, and for the first couple, scenes that she's in, she does.
Yeah.
She comes off as snobbish and rude. She comes off as pretentious as all get out. And then the second shit starts getting real, she just kind of turns into a normal kid, and I don't care about the fact that she has any thing to bring to the table. I
think makes sense in the scheme of the movie, because...
it totally makes sense. It just, she loses her, special friend power. Yeah,
what made her special to begin with.
Yeah.
And so she's wheeling and dealing with Z, which, the first thing that sent me down some, rabbit holes on this movie is, Z's wearing a Skull and Bone shirt.
Yes, she is.
I know there's more to it, but...
Yeah, but it is a fun theory.
She's talking to a prep school chick.
She is.
Coincidence?
Maybe.
Yes, it's probably a coincidence. It's totally a coincidence. It's just my stupid conspiracy theory riddled mind.
Yeah, but did you catch the backgrounds of some of the characters? You get introduced to characters who are named Skull and Bones throughout the thing, and it's implied that maybe that's the band.
No, it's heavily mentioned that...
Yeah.
it is them. Well, at least in the commentary by Kenan.
In the movie itself, you're kind of left to yourself to put it together, which I like. It's a nice little Easter egg.
Yeah, I personally, I mean, for me, how this movie's set is kind of, it just made me think about some things, just because, like, this is a young elementary age girl going house to house in the 80s
asking for money.
Just
straight up asking for money.
And how, like, we used to have drives and stuff like that when we were kids, and it's like...
yeah, I went to house to sell cookies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then they also preach at school stranger danger.
Yeah, I do remember, because when we ran and did doorbells, like, we had left the 80s and we're now in the 90s. And we were at least smart enough to go, there are enemies out there.
Yeah.
We hadn't reached full panic level as of today.
Well, and I think I'm looking at this retrospectively because we're kind of at the tail end of the golden age of serial killers.
This is true. But at the same time, what she's asking for is obnoxious and silly. But her going door to door is, in the context of the movie, completely normal.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, shush. And so she is wheeling and dealing, sends her off with emergency money that she was supposed to spend on DJ if necessary. Again, making her a shitty babysitter. And DJ and Chowder are up in the room, and she comes up to bug them. And they've been up there all day. All night. Watching, taking shifts. Chowder hisses at her as she comes in and turns on the light.
I love Chowder. They've been nonstop staring at the house across the street, and this is the scene that I think most adults, their red flags for the average watcher. This is the scene that most adults go, "Oh snap," because it's so blatant. Even kids notice. There's a not so hidden bit about how they haven't left this room once. Not even to go pee. Don't drink that.
Which, they had to change that line to keep the PG rating, because it was originally written piss.
Of course. But, so it's implied that they have chugged a whole bunch of 7-Up or Mountain Dew or something like that to keep themselves awake, and then realized they had to pee because they just chugged a 2-liter. Boy, had 2 liters still in the room.
Hence the drink.
And so I think this is the point for the not theorist, average, casual watcher where they go, hold up a second. Because the other lines, for the most part, are made by Chowder. They're kind of not made a big deal out of, and he just kind of briefly mentions them, and if you aren't really paying attention, you wouldn't care or notice. This is in your face. And I think this is the part of the movie that most people remember and are like, that's for me when this movie went from being like innocent, fun kids movie to like, there is something under the surface here.
Yeah, it was written to be a little bit more mature than
for sure.
what it turned out to be. And so Z is like, you're weird, whatever.
Y'all gross, goodbye.
I gotta go and do stuff. And so she leaves, and they're watching the neighborhood, and
dumbass girl is it's kind of implied that either she doesn't get out of her house very often or she's new to the neighborhood.
Well, they also just saw a
dog get eaten.
Yeah, exactly.
Which the dog, hilarious. That scene is hilarious to me.
I'm not going there.
It's a silly looking dog being eaten in a silly looking way.
Yeah. And so actually no, that's an interesting part because he's kind of on the sidewalk still. And so now, that's actually a nice little touch because now she's starting to break away from the sidewalk.
Yeah.
She's extending her boundaries. And we also see when they go to try and stop Jenny that she the house plays with the food.
Yeah. She lets Jenny get all the way up, ring the doorbell, waits for her to turn around and be distracted before slowly trying to eat her.
Yep. And then as she's walking back, the pipes, and we have many questions on why there's pipes
There's a lot of plumbing in places that shouldn't be in this house.
Which, later on, I'm not surprised why that stuff's there.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's meant to be silly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the cops show up.
I love these two cops because guess who one of the cops is?
Paul Blart Mall Cop.
is now a small suburb cop.
Yep. Officer Landers and Officer Lister, played by Nick Cannon, which...
Yeah.
In the original writing, and how it was originally planned before they started doing anything, Landers was actually supposed to be the black cop, and Lister was supposed to be the white cop, the new rookie cop. But when they actually started acting, Nick Cannon was better as the side character cop.
And let's be real. Dear Paul Bart Mall Cop has always been he's always been a cop at heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got the body of a cop.
He has the body and the attitude and the silly dad joke.
Yes.
That, like, all comes together to have mall cop energy.
Yeah.
And this small town cop / sheriff is full-on mall cop material. He's not meant to be the only police force in this town.
He's the mall cop that unfortunately has control over a town.
Yeah, actually. Because throughout all of the witty jokes that he makes and his, new lieutenant being jumpy and
trigger happy. Very trigger happy.
Very trigger happy. And then on top of that, he's clearly read the rulebook through and through, but he is bad with words. So he says the wrong word in place of another word that would have been the correct one, and thus gets written off as an idiot.
Yeah, which I honestly can see, knowing where it's set now and how small the town is.
Oh, yeah, like, this town probably at least once a year he has to go get a cat out of a house sort of situation.
He's just there as necessary. He's the Andy Griffith of the town.
He is supposed to be the Andy Griffith 100%, and unfortunately this house is definitely 100% haunted.
Yes. And so he tells them, don't ever bother this house here. I'm going to escort you away.
And his escort is very, like, not
what
funny.
What are you doing?
Okay, so I kind of see him because his character, he knows he's supposed to be kind of the Andy Griffith of the town. Like, he knows that that's his role and job and that he's not supposed to be serious. But he also clearly, like, doesn't have the... Because Andy Griffith, the reason he's so genuine and pure for a lot of people is because he comes at everything from a teacher's standpoint, which is, I think, what he originally was a teacher.
I have no clue. I don't keep up with a lot of...
old-timey TV?
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Well, I know Andy Griffith's show, I just don't remember elements to it.
'Tis wholesome as fuck.
Yes, it is. And a bit sexist. Actually, really sexist.
Unfortunately, it was very much a product of its time. But
yeah. Still a good show.
In the most wholesome way possible. But yeah, that was why Andy Griffith worked as, like, the dumb small town cop. Because he was coming at everything from a caring and teaching perspective.
A fatherly perspective.
Very much a fatherly perspective. Whereas this guy would make a better weird drunkle. Drunk uncle, if you will. And so instead of just, like, nicely being like, kids, I understand you're worried. Go home, I'll take care of it. He follows them slowly in his patrol car. And Chowder's already been run over once in this movie. We don't need to risk this anymore.
I think he hits Chowder at one point,
he does, like, bump into him.
Yeah.
Poor Chowder.
Yeah.
And so it's clear to the kids that this guy's not taking them seriously and that they're on their own.
Yes. And so they regroup somehow back at DJ's place.
They look her up because she's the only kid named Jenny in the town.
And they both kind of have a little squabble over her. And this is the question that I have about the piss in a bottle.
Uh-huh.
Because she picks it up and they tell her it's piss in the bottle.
Uh-huh.
And the piss is carbonated.
Okay, so I have thought about this, because it bothered me as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
It bothered me too. And so I went back to my nasty middle school and elementary school days where I was a gross human being. Okay. I apologize to my mom profusely. But here's my theory. And it's just a theory. I have nothing to properly back this up other than just self-experience of being a dumbass as a child. Here's my thought. I think that they managed to scrounge together a couple bucks, which back in the day got you a couple of 2 liters.
Yeah.
And if there's the 2 for $4 sale, you get more than you originally bargained for. They each chug a couple, right? They have to pee real bad. Empty it. Close it. Put it on the shelf. Forget which one's which. Now they're not going to touch it. Now all of those bottles are off limits. Nobody can go over there anymore. They're not risking it. It just gets to live over there until one of them throws it away.
Yeah.
That's my theory, is it's not actually carbonated pee. I think it's just soda pop, and they're too chicken to find out if it's actually pee or not.
Yeah, because they're trying to one-up each other at this point, saying, that's your piss bottle.
They are very much trying to do the classic elementary boy
wooing
wooing of just being a dumbass in front of everyone.
Yes.
Adorable.
still in that phase.
It's okay.
And so they decide they need to take action. They need to stop this monster house.
Yes. And this right here. This is the scene where Jenny's being an adult and a planner and a thinker-througher and a doer kind of ends. Because she clearly, like, motivates them to act. Yeah. And then she stops, like, having good like, she could have been a good planner. She could have been, like, a quick thinking on her feet sort of person. But like, instead she just kind of reacts with the rest of them for the rest of the movie. Yeah,
pretty much. But this is probably one of my favorite parts in the movie.
Oh, same.
To get intelligence, they go to the smartest man in the land.
God bless this man.
The counterpart to our beloved Richard Ramirez, a.k.a. Bones. Or Skull.
Yeah.
To Bones.
To Bones, who works in a pizza joint, and the only reason he works in the pizza joint is because he's addicted to the video game that's in the lobby.
Yeah. Well...
in the dining room.
He's also burnout, too.
Well, yeah, he's working on a pizza joint so that he can play a video game.
Yeah. And I thought this was interesting because listening to Gil Kennon's commentary on it, he mentioned that the original script called for Bones to be a book.
Yeah.
In a library that was supposed to have all this information. And it created probably one of the best characters in this whole movie.
Oh, for sure. I love him. But it's funny that was the original, because a lot of the criticism I saw about the character was people didn't understand why he was there, and they felt he was over the top, and they thought it would have been better if they had found the information in a book somewhere. Which is so ironic, because they changed it from a book specifically because that's kind of boring, and I like the change.
Yeah, I do too, because they're going to who they presume to be the wise man. I hope my nephews and nieces come to me as a wise man.
You gotta get real good at dancing and playing video games simultaneously. No. Also, there's a point where he is playing, like, you can hear video game beeping, and he hasn't lost yet, because he's only got the 1 quarter, right?
Yeah.
He hasn't lost yet. Video game's still beeping. Both hands are in the air, and he is looking at the kids. This man is legitimately magic.
Yep. And so he informs them that it is whatever the stupid pseudo-scientific name for a haunted house is.
Yeah, he throws some real basic level haunting info at them, which I like, because it's legitimately, if you watch current, like, dumbass TV, like, Ghost Hunt or Paranormal Activity, that sort of TV shows, you already know way more than this guy. But you know what? He's not going to let these kids know he doesn't know all the answers. So he's going to pull what little ghost knowledge he knows from his video game lore and apply it here.
Yeah.
Which I love. It's fine. Like, I don't care.
And he gets a beep on his pager.
I don't know.
Yeah, this is the age of pagers.
Oh, pagers.
Grabs the pizza off the game and runs out. But before he can run out, he takes a bite of the kid's chocolate and runs away.
Nasty.
Let's also mention that Bones is played by John Heder.
Yes.
Napoleon Dynamite.
Yes.
Which
you get the vibes.
Side note that I learned, he's a twin. And
twins.
His twin was also in this movie, or not in the movie, but is a computer animator and worked on the movie.
Twins working on the same project? That's too confusing.
Yeah, but anyway, they know what they need to do. They're gonna
infiltrate the house and attack its heart. Which is such video game logic.
And child logic, because how are they going to take down this monster house?
Squirt guns.
Squirt guns, but first they're going to drug it with cold medicine that Chowder has stolen from his dad's pharmacy.
I also appreciate that Chowder's dad's pharmacy puts the high-level cold syrup right next to the door.
I think this is back before people realized it was a problem.
Oh, I'm sure, but, like, it does crack me up. Because nowadays, you know what's by the front door? Greeting cards. Yeah. Have as many as you want, thieves.
Yeah, I love Chowder in this scene because he's such a bumblebutt.
He is.
And I can only imagine his dad watching him on the CCTV footage like, God damn it.
That's my dumbass son.
Yeah, why is he taking all this cough medicine? And so that's what they're going to do. This part was actually kind of interesting from the CGI portion of their plan. Because a lot of the props, they're wireframed. but they put weights in them to make it feel like,
Yeah.
to simulate weights, like the water would actually move back and forth.
And honestly, from here till the end of the movie, I don't have any problems with the CGI from here on out. It was just the daytime scenes. Everyone was too well lit.
Yeah, exactly. And so here's where I realized kind of like the limited scope / maybe budget of the movie is there's not any extras. Because even when they're going to attack the house...
This town's real empty.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like right before Halloween and they're trying to stop everything. We don't really see any extras at all. No one crossing the street, no extra cars, whatever the computer can handle at the time.
Yeah. Which nowadays leads to the feeling that the town's empty.
Yeah.
But kind of works to make it creepy.
Yeah. I mean, it's a small town. They could be the small group of kids. Yeah. But they dress up a vacuum cleaner as a character, as a kid, which I learned who they based it off of. Yeah. It's one of the kids at the party in Donnie Darko.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. It's a nice little good catch.
And a lot of people complain that that's not how vacuum cleaners work. We do not live in the age of new innovations, unfortunately. A lot of really old gadgets are way cooler than what we have now. And my grandmother also had a vacuum cleaner very similar to this. It did run around on the floor by itself. And it also didn't have an on button. You just plugged it in. And then you unplugged it when you were done. Yeah. It was annoying.
Oh, yeah. And so while the house is waking up and going to take the vacuum cleaner with the backpack and cold
full
medicine,
of drugs.
which they're not even open. So like,
I mean, for a house though, would it matter?
Yeah, I would assume so.
This is also kid logic though.
Yeah,
like, they're
exactly.
Just gonna...
This is my overanalyzing of it.
Yeah, no, that's the level of detail that like maybe I would have liked to see Jenny have, where she's like, guys, you can't just put them in there. They need to be like in the squirt gun or in a plastic bag as opposed to in the bottle. Yeah. But this is kid logic.
Yep. And the cops show up, foil this plan.
And are the cops angry that they've stolen a bunch of cough syrup? Not really. I mean, they tell them don't do that, but they're more upset that they defied their telling them to stay off this guy's property.
Yeah, and instead of like, and we also realize that the cop is, the head cop, Paul Blart, is...
that's his name from now on.
Takes like a quick swig of the...
has a little sip of the cough syrup. Which
for that quick boost.
Yeah, you know, helps ease the pain.
And while he's out there, the house pulls him in.
The house just full on eats the cops.
And to counter your logic of a grown-ass person would run away from it, what does his partner do?
His partner, though, has been proven many times to not be the most quick-witted person on the block.
Exactly.
Unfortunately.
And the kids are stuck in the back of the car, and oh boy, is the house going to bring them in.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, hi. Adorable.
Piss off.
I do like this part, because instead of having the kids try to leave the car, like, out in the street, I like that this is the scene where the house does bring them in, and they get out through the busted back window, because it doesn't leave any holes in the plot. As far as, like,
it's their way into the house, because otherwise how would they have gotten in?
Yeah.
And so, once they're in the house, more questions come up.
Of course.
I don't understand the architecture of the house to begin with.
Okay, so I kind of do, and there's a specific scene on why.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that the old man designed and built this entire house himself, and he built it while there was no pre-made plans. He just started building. He picked up a hammer and he started swinging. Okay. And I think that's why, as architects, this house bothers the crap out of us.
Oh, yeah.
Because he would see something like the upstairs window being built out a little bit as opposed to its neighboring window. He saw someone else's house that did that. Or he's inside and he's like, it would be nice if there was a shelf there. Builds a shelf. No consequences to the outside. Yeah. I know this because I have family members who do this shit. And when they're done, they are happy with how it came out. Because to them, it is perfectly functional.
Which...
It's
more
fair.
Power to you.
It's fair.
We're in a different world.
But as architects forced to look at this monster of a house, It's bad.
Yeah.
It's real bad.
And, side note, I wish they went this direction. The house originally was supposed to be flesh and blood, like guts and stuff inside.
Gushy on the inside?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have liked that.
I would have too. And I would make the argument that if you're in the mindset and camp as me, where the house is slowly turning into a living thing, that maybe if they hadn't killed it by midnight or whenever she like naturally would have died, then it would have gotten squishy and gross. Yeah. Like eventually I would like to think that it would have turned full on squish.
Yes. And so they're walking around the house and they see a big glowy
chandelier?
uvula.
Okay. So I figured out what the chandelier is.
Yeah.
It's a big old thing of explosives.
Huh.
That's my theory, is that, like, the reason the house explodes is that he's set this whole house up to have explosives throughout it. And he hung this big thing in, like, the middle of the house. Originally, before it was the uvula. Because he knew that at some point he had to kill her.
Yeah, when it went too far. Because we found explosives and we found that he was watching DJ. Okay,
so that's my theory of what this thing is. Honestly, though, that's just my guess. I couldn't find a good picture of it to figure out what exactly it really was.
I think it's just like those old wine bottles. Like the big wine bottles. And
that could be.
Stuck a light in it and fishnet and called it good.
That's also possible.
And so they spray it and the thing has a perfectly arcing bleh.
It like full on Stitch from Lilo and Stitch spits across the driveway.
Yes. And we learn Chowder is still an idiot.
Chowder is real dumb. Bless him.
You still have not convinced me about certain topics we talked about. Which we'll save that for another time. Because I'm probably wrong and it's
it's fine.
It's a different rabbit hole, but Chowder mentions, and it's another foreshadowing, he's like, oh, so it's a girl house.
Chowder doesn't understand what a uvula is, because
it's a gag reflex. I don't have one.
Yeah, and I think I get where you're going with it.
Yeah.
I do.
It's just, like...
It's just dumb enough, and Chowder's the right character for it.
Yeah. But it's the way he for me, it's the way he answers it and the order of the question that...
Oh, yeah, no, it definitely reads...
Something else is going on with Chowder.
It definitely does, even if that's not the thing.
Yes. And then also, when they actually fall down into the mouth of the house...
I like to think of it as the gateway to hell's stomach.
Yes. He mentions that... this is Nevercracker's stash. Stash.
Yeah.
I think he's just parroting people at this point. But it's funny.
It is.
And so in this house, they find a sanctuary that the Golden Key
goes to. And the sanctuary, if you look at it, if you take time to look at it, it's the cage that Constance was originally in from the circus.
Yes.
But they don't spend a whole lot of time looking at it in the house.
No. And there's a heart-shaped lock.
It's clearly a full-on shrine. Like, he's got candles, and he's brought down flowers and pictures of the two of them. And there is Constance, the dead wife, who supposedly he ate. Supposedly ate, fully encased in concrete. And the lightest touch breaks her shell away, and there are all of her bones.
Yeah.
Which, that's not how concrete works. I wish. But it does... The kids are at least smart enough, and the plot is well written enough that they go, well, he couldn't have eaten her. She's buried in concrete.
Yep.
So, points there.
And then the house realizes, oh, shit, there's someone inside me.
Yes. And in another Stephen King style, attempts to lure Chowder away with his beloved basketball.
Yeah. It's learning.
Yeah, it's learning.
It's using an old tactic it previously used.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the children, for some reason, are brought back upstairs to be thrown back in?
I don't quite understand everything. I feel like maybe the portal to hell broke a little bit, and they ended up in the basement instead of stomach hell. I don't know.
We have no clue. But then Jenny grabs the gag reflex uvula.
Yep, and they all get nasty water launched out onto the sidewalk.
I am so glad your husband hates that word.
Yes, it is a gross word, much like moist.
Yes. Moist. Yeah, and so they get barfed out of the house.
They do.
And the house is crying a little bit because they pulled on the uvula.
Yeah, which is a nice touch.
Yes. And so this is where the trio somewhat falls apart because they're having an argument of DJ has finally grown up. He's like, we were idiots. Why the hell did we do that?
Yeah, this isn't our problem.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's not necessarily their problem,
but it's a problem for adults.
But they thought about it in a kid's way. Like, yeah. He's like, oh, actually,
yeah, if he
cough syrup, that's going to put a house to sleep. It's a ghost house.
Yeah, like, it's definitely the moment of realization for them.
And as he's crossing the street, which, by the way, no one looks anyway when crossing the road in this movie.
No, like, these children apparently just sleep in the middle of the road.
DJ is almost hit by a vehicle.
Yes.
And out steps Mr. Nevercracker.
So this part of the movie is implied, but it's pretty well implied that Mr. Nevercracker broke out of the hospital and stole a ambulance or a car of some kind to drive himself back to the house.
Yep.
Because you don't get released in those robes.
No, not at all.
Nor do they let you usually drive yourself home if you're still in the robes.
Again, other questions.
Yeah.
Like,
how did he escape?
Yes.
I would love this movie from his point of view.
Actually, might not be bad. If a short.
A short. It would be a good short.
And so he shows up and fills in the backstory that we've been missing, that he fell in love with Constance, who was
part of the Freak Circus.
She was the giant woman, which we've another little nod to what she would become. The side of her cage says, the woman as big as a house.
Yeah, it is a little detail.
Yeah.
And so he falls in love with her and offers to whisk her away. And we kind of get a blur of them being happy together. Mm-hmm. And then he promises her the one thing she's never had and didn't ever think she'd have. A home. And not just any home. A home built just for her.
Which, I hate this scene so much.
I do too.
So the biggest thing, no one builds a house like this. No. They just threw stuff together and made it look nice.
Yes.
The thing that got me first is the staircase has no structure to it whatsoever.
No, it doesn't.
Also, she comes out of a room through a door that's framed, doors in place, a room that has nothing around it.
Yes.
Yeah. It's so stupid.
It is very stupid, but at the same time, I think this scene was very much meant to show, like, that he wanted to build her the perfect home for her. Mm-hmm. And even if he had to do it himself the wrong way, he was going to do it.
Yeah. And we also learn of her anger towards children on her lawn.
Yes.
Or people on her lawn in general, because
they were throwing stuff at her house, which is kind of a tie back to when she was in the circus. People threw things at her at the circus. And there's also, honestly, Constance is a character who you can spend as much time analyzing her as you want.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of details throughout the movie that kind of lead to there being more to her than just being a large woman who lived in the circus and then left.
Yeah.
It's subtly implied that, like, the circus didn't even want her. She's out by herself.
Yeah.
The circus, like, she's not doing well at the circus. This is the first time she's been happy. There's a whole lot to unpack in her and herself that we could probably have a mini-sode on. But
yeah.
But there's the one constant, throughout her character, which I like, is even from the beginning when we first meet her, it is shown and proven that she definitely, in some capacity, somehow, some way, struggles with rage.
Yeah.
And so the fact that the house's only emotion is rage makes sense to me, anyway.
Yeah, there's a little bit later on, but
yeah, there's definitely, like, more going on.
But all we see is anger.
There's a lot that could be unpacked and unraveled, detailing her out and why that is, but
yeah, and also just kind of showing the age of the movie a little bit is there's no houses around.
No.
Where did the children come from?
Yeah, which is because they couldn't like physically make it, but also I kind of like it as a bit of a nod to like this is how she felt, was like this is their paradise and their island, and these kids are in her like perfect paradise. I
just had an idea. Mm-hmm. So she gets pelted with eggs and she falls into the ground, dies,
buries herself in concrete.
Yeah, she pulls the mortar, whatever the hell it is, and that's how she dies. What if the children were made up? What if it was just an accident and she fell down?
It's possible.
Because either that or there's 3 witnesses.
True, but also, depending on who those kids were.
Who else is buried in the basement? There's no supporting proof.
There's no other
It's just
children.
my stupid thoughts.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so before I had a stupid thought, but when the monster house goes full monster, knowing that's going to be destroyed because children are there.
Yeah, and they know, and
she's past the point of no return.
And also she can hear her husband, kind of admitting defeat.
Mm-hmm. The house starts to break apart. Yeah. And it leaves its foundations and it's truly a monster now.
Yeah, like it's moved from being a poltergeist to being its own entity. Mm-hmm.
And Nevercracker is running off with the kids. They're going to lure it to the court
to the quarry.
Well, it's not a quarry, the old construction site.
Yeah.
Because there's this old site where they were supposed to like build a high rise and it never happened.
For all 12 people living in this town.
Yes. And so the house chases after them and he's going to destroy the house.
Yep. He's got a piece. He somehow has a thing of TNT on him. Or dynamite or something. Yeah.
He picked it up because it barfed out of the house.
Oh, it did. Okay.
Yeah. And so at this point, they've kind of calmed down the house a little bit.
Yeah,
and
she's clearly still got some reasoning left.
I don't like the way he touches the house and calls her a bad girl.
Fair.
Yes, this is the rabbit hole I went down.
This is a little bit of a rabbit hole. I went on a slightly different rabbit hole than you. Yours is a clear rabbit hole to one side.
Yes, it is a hole of some kind.
Yes. I went into a slightly different angle. I question Constance both as a person and then later on in her death. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure Constance is at full mental capacity. I don't know. In some way. She shows a lot of rage problems. When she talks, the few lines that she gets don't seem... They're not a lot.
Yeah.
She's very much isolated by even the freaks in the circus, which...
They've caged her. Which means, like, they can't even reason with her. Her husband seems to be the only one who can, and even then, there's a lot of talking down he has to do with her, but at the same time, he still loves her. She'd be a modern-day Karen.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
But, so there's a lot of questions with Constance, and then because of that, now that she's also a ghost house, how do you... If you already had trouble reasoning with someone and having them understand you when they were alive, how do you get them to understand you when they're a raging monster house?
It's like that episode in Supernatural with the haunted highway, where they are convincing this ghost that she's the haunting.
Yeah.
And showing her, like, she's been dead for, like, 10 years now.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's kind of like that. And so they do eventually get the house into the quarry because Nevercracker, for whatever his brilliance, he decides to strike a match on her doorstep.
Yeah, not smart.
No.
Romantic, but not smart.
Yeah, and she freaks out, and Chowder comes to the rescue with his...
his one ability.
His machinery,
which he's found the keys to earlier in the movie,
and starts pulling the house into the basement, into the construction site.
Yeah,
and so the house is now in tatters, and they regroup, saying, "Hey, do we do it?" Of course not. The house has a second floor.
Of course it does.
And I can only describe it as Howl's Moving Castle on meth.
Yes, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole thing of Chowder distracting them. Jenny kissing DJ and eventually using the crane to get him near it so he can drop the dynamite down the chimney because
the furnace is lit and then he wouldn't need matches to light it.
Yeah.
It's a process, it's a loop, but you know what? We got there in the end.
It's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine.
I've seen worse in horror movies, so, you know.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah, and so the house blows up. We
Yes.
see Nevercracker and the ghost of Constance in an embrace.
Having one last moment.
And then he immediately starts to break down of, I've been done with this shit for 40-some years now.
Yeah, which... Fair, man.
Kind of ruins the romantic moment, the sweet, tender moment it had.
It is, but also I think that his lines, unfortunately, didn't... I think they were meant to be kind of two-sided, and people were so done with the house and Constance that I think the second side was lost.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was also trying... Because he doesn't say I. He says we.
Yeah.
And so I think he was trying to portray that, like, either when Constance was of her right mind, or, like, was able to, like, talk with him properly, like, even she as a person was done with being a monster house.
Okay.
And so I think that's kind of more I think that's the second side of the lines that he says.
Yeah.
But again, the audience and the kids feel like this is him being free.
Yeah,
and I think that's perfect because it leaves the kids feeling like he's now like a good friend.
Yeah, it also brings up when did he first start talking to the house or communicating with the house?
So he does kind of imply that when she died, he continued to build the house in hopes that she would haunt it.
Okay.
Like, it's not ever...
Oh, that
like,
is a goal.
He knows that he made Constance what she is, and that's why he took so much responsibility, I think. That's my interpretation.
Bury me in the walls, baby, so I may haunt you forever.
But yeah.
Hell yeah.
But actually.
That'd be dope.
Yeah. So I think part of the reason why he says we are done is because the two of them together, like, he brought her back, but she stayed.
Yeah.
And I think that's what he was trying to say, but the kids don't interpret it that way, and the audience doesn't either. And that's fine. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a nice, clean ending.
It is.
And even then, it continues just a little bit more where they're picking toys out of the basement because that's where they were stored. And DJ's helping because DJ knows what the kids had.
He had a running list of what everyone had stolen from them.
And started giving them back to him, going on their way. Chowder gets his ball back.
Yeah.
And on their way from leaving the place, or from leaving the basement, Chowder says something.
Yes, he does. As Chowder do.
He says, he mentioned, Nevercracker mentions he's moving to Florida or something.
He's retiring to Florida.
And Chowder says, you know what? I hope he finds someone new, like a beach house.
Yeah. But
And my first thought is, he definitely has objectophilia.
I don't think that's where it was trying
what
to go,
them
though.
pipes do.
I see where you went with that, sir.
I am a horrible person. I will ruin children's movies for you.
But you know what? That's part of the fun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, this is where the movie should have ended. However, we wouldn't have our rating if we ended here. So if you watch just a hair farther, everyone who was supposedly eaten and dead by the house, they all come crawling out in some fashion, and it's fine.
Bones comes out at the very end, and Z is now...
She doesn't like him anymore. He doesn't respect her as a woman, and he doesn't believe in the feminist movement. So she's with the...
Bones. Skull gets out. Bones is who he's with.
Yeah.
She's with.
The pizza guy. She likes the pizza guy now. Which, honestly, he appears to be a better match for her, because he definitely has a job, whether or not he's good at it. Like she says, he respects her. And also they appear closer in age. So,
yeah,
good for them. I hope they enjoyed, having band drama together.
But I also kind of question her age a little bit too.
I think sure. Everyone with enough eyeliner looks different.
Yeah. I think she's older than we're assuming she is.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, but yeah, that's how
and that's
Monster House ends.
Yeah. It's a good one. I watch it every year.
I know you do. I haven't watched this one since high school.
And honestly, I think that's how most people view this movie. And that's fine. This movie's a good one watch. But if you're like me and you like to think endlessly about the possibilities of a man creating a monster house for his wife, this movie's perfect. Lots to think about.
Yes, and I'm done thinking about this movie because I found a Wikipedia page full of all kinds of fetishes.
Of course. Once you start a rabbit hole, you never know where it ends.
Some I didn't even know about and didn't want to know existed. So, yeah. Thank you, Monster House. I'm glad I went down that rabbit hole.
There's something for everyone.
Yeah.
But that's actually kind of the truth of Monster House, is you can take as much or as little and go down whichever direction with this movie that you want.
Exactly.
So. You
can take Chris's spoopy route or my whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Romance in two different directions.
Yes, romance. But yeah, so at the end of it all, there's not really a whole lot that came out after this. There was video games. There were 2 video games and a graphic novel, but
the first video game's playable, so there's that.
And we can't get a hold of the graphic novel, so we can't really talk too much about it,
unfortunately. But there have been some rumors floating around about a sequel. I can't find anything from any actual source about a sequel, and honestly, I don't think this movie needs or deserves one. It's got a bit of a cult following now because, like you said, people saw it originally, came back to it as an adult, found it intriguing, and now watch it pretty regularly. It's also a good, safe one to pop on during the Halloween season, during the daytime hours when the kids are still up, before you get to watch, The Descent 2.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so...
my pick for Halloween.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's not a whole lot of stuff to continue on with, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, no, I honestly don't want a sequel, or if they do something, I want them to go
a totally new way.
A totally new way, and keep it dark.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the biggest thing, I think, with especially children's Halloween movies. There has to be some element of darkness to it. Like Hocus Pocus last year.
Yeah.
These witches were going to suck the lives out of children.
They were going to legit kill kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they did. They killed kids in the beginning.
And one of them comes back and bitches about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that is why this movie works as a Halloween classic for in the spoopy world.
Yes.
Because that is the line of spoopy, is it needs to have some real consequences, but not so much that we got to run for our lives every second for the rest of eternity. Yeah,
I agree.
But if I hadn't made you watch this movie, would you say that others need to?
That's the thing, is it's fun as a friend group movie because we get the different perspectives.
Oh, sure.
I actually enjoyed watching it more than I thought I would when I watched it alone.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know if my mind would have gone down the rabbit holes that it would have.
Yeah.
But I liked it, honestly. It's better than I thought it was going to be. I mean, it's not great. It's not a masterpiece, but it's good enough. I would definitely say, if you haven't seen it in a while, if you're having a movie night, get a bunch of friends together, watch it. Don't necessarily watch it on your own.
I wouldn't say pay a lot of money for it, but if you see it on TV or you're willing to dish out $2, it's a good time.
Yep.
I think this is a fun movie to have in the background while you decorate, make some, scary cookies, and wait for it to get dark so that you can watch something actually scary.
Yes. Which, unfortunately, some people in our group can't handle spooky.
That's okay. That's why we have 2 different movie nights.
Yes, exactly. So, anywho, this has been The Good, the Bad, and the Weird.
Thanks for listening.
Stay spooky, everyone.
Peace.
Peace.